And finally, the single-celled organisms. They can be plant-like, making their own food through photosynthesis, or animal-like, hunting for their next tiny meal. Some single-celled organisms can even team up to form colonies that work together and build complex structures. All these microbes are the foundation of life. At first, there were nothing but microbes on Earth. They were just hanging out and enjoying the simple life. But time kept ticking, and the more years passed, the more they evolved. They changed a little, sometimes acquiring some special abilities and passing these abilities on to their children. Generations come and go, and those changes keep adding up. Microbes became more and more complex. And after billions of years and trillions of changes, they become something as amazing as the animals, plants, and people we see on Earth today. It was a very long and tedious process, so let's try to repeat it now. Like, what if all living organisms on our modern Earth, except for the first microbes, would disappear? Without the hustle and bustle of life, the world would become eerily quiet. Streets that were once filled with people and animals would now be empty and peaceful. Buildings and cities would stand alone like silent monuments to the vanished world. First, we would have a huge disruption of food chains. Without plants, herbivores, and carnivores, the intricate food chains and webs that sustain life would simply collapse. Our world wouldn't be as wild and vibrant. The tiny microbes are cool, but they can't recreate the same big, bustling party that we all love. Also, remember how we mentioned that microbes often eat the leftovers of animals and other organisms? Just like when you eat cake and turn it into energy, they turn these bits into nutrients that the Earth loves. But now, without the big animals and plants, there wouldn't be as much leftover cake. The microbes would still work hard, but their evolution would be really slowed down. Now, you might think that without plants, we wouldn't have any more oxygen. But this isn't entirely true. In fact, trees produce only about 20 to 30% of the oxygen on Earth. So who really helps us breathe? Plankton from SpongeBob. But seriously, ocean plankton, especially phytoplankton, which is responsible for around 80% of Earth's oxygen production. Phytoplankton are considered microorganisms. They're tiny, single-celled or colonial organisms that float around in the oceans, harnessing sunlight. So, if all land plants and animals disappeared, oceanic plankton would still continue to produce oxygen in the oceans through photosynthesis. They would become even more essential for maintaining a breathable atmosphere. Although now these guys would face some big challenges. You see, big animals like whales and fish usually provide nutrients to the ocean. These nutrients are plant food that phytoplankton need to grow and thrive. Without the big animals, there might be fewer of these special nutrients around. The phytoplankton might not grow as well. And since these guys act as the bottom of the ocean food chain, that could have a domino effect on the whole ocean food web. And also, with fewer plants, there's less oxygen being made, and carbon dioxide starts to stick around more. The balance of gases in the air would change a bit, and when the balance tips, it can affect the weather. The Earth's temperature and the way wind moves would change too. Plus, too much carbon dioxide can make the air feel a bit stuffy. Next, animals like moles, ants, and worms as nature's engineers. They're digging tunnels, burrows, and homes in the ground. When these animals dig and move around, they're actually helping the soil. They mix it up and create pathways for air and water to travel through. It's like they're giving the soil a good shake to keep it healthy. So without the animal engineers, the soil might get a bit packed and tight. Water from rain wouldn't be able to seep in as easily. When they're gone, the nutrients aren't getting spread around as much, and the soil might miss its tasty treats. So the whole ecosystem underground could become less cozy and more cramped. But the most interesting question is, what would happen to all our human artifacts? People disappeared, but their builds remained. Let's look at how this could affect the development of microbes on Earth. Our human-made things need proper care. So, if there were no more people around, all these things would be destroyed very fast. Microbes can grow on surfaces, and over time, they would start to cover buildings, streets, and structures. It might not be visible right away, but given enough time, you'd see a thin layer of microbial growth. Nature is a powerful thing. Buildings that were once shielded by human maintenance would now be exposed to the elements. Wind, rain, sun, and snow would all destroy and break down everything we've ever created. And some places on Earth have really tough weather, super hot summers, freezing winters, or crazy storms. In these areas, buildings and cities might even get sadder faster. Microbes would contribute to this too, as some of them produce acids that can break down materials. Slowly, cracks might appear, and materials like concrete and wood might weaken. Humans overestimate their power when they call themselves kings of nature. If we disappeared, in just a couple of thousand years, there would be almost no traces of human civilization left. It would be like we never even existed. But in any case, this event would offer an exciting opportunity for microbes to evolve in a completely new way. With the spotlight all to themselves, they're free to explore and adapt to their surroundings. Some places might become more challenging, while others might become easier to conquer. Microbes reproduce quickly, sometimes in just a matter of minutes. This rapid evolution could lead to a burst of new microbial species. Could microbes rehabitate the planet? Absolutely. Over time, new species of animals and plants would begin to appear. Like the butterfly effect, any small changes would have led to completely new types of life, and perhaps to new types of humans. In any case, these rapidly evolving microbes could reshape the way ecosystems work. They'd interact with each other in new ways, creating intricate relationships and cycles. The balance of life on Earth might be very different from what we know today. What would it look like? Let's leave that to your imagination.
If you were to look at Earth from the International Space Station at night, you'd be able to see the lights of the cities from space. That's how big our impact as a species is. There are huge multicultural cities all around the world. We've built buildings so high they nearly disappear out of sight. Cities built from the ground up for thousands and thousands of people to live in. But oh, what's this? What a beautiful monkey! What are you doing there, buddy? You want that banana? Yeah, it looks delicious. Be careful now, don't fall down that tree. Oops. Boy, nature can be so brutal sometimes. I'll bet it didn't wake up thinking it was going to become a lion's breakfast. What? No humans? Where did they all go? Looks like when that monkey fell from the tree, it created a chain of events that led to no humans ever existing on Earth. I know what this is. We must be in an alternate universe. Well, let's skip a few thousand years ahead. What does Earth look like? Humans have altered about 50% or more of the planet's surface. So there aren't going to be any cities or landscape previously shaped by us in this reality. There's not going to be a human touch at all. The Earth now seems to be an animal paradise. They're everywhere. These animals that were previously only found in Africa are now all over different continents. There are lions roaming free in America. Oh, and look, in Europe, there are rhinos, elephants, wolves. Wow, moose. Even bears are here. Since there are no humans taking up most of Earth's space, mammals are now free to be everywhere. Well, you know, different mammals than us. There's a huge diversity of them too. Earth has become what seems to be an expansion of the Africa we know today in terms of animal species. You can see large mammals too. Giant sloths, saber-tooths, and even mastodons are now walking the Earth like in the olden times. The reason why our Earth isn't like this is that humans take up a lot of the available space with their structures. For example, the reason why there's so much animal diversity in Africa in our universe isn't that the continent is just suited for animals to thrive. It's mostly because we haven't been too active in a big part of the continent. Our ancestors had a lot to do with the extinction of large mammals. Ice Age wasn't the only culprit there. On our Earth, humans are the intelligent life form. How about on this planet? As you might know, natural selection is what guides evolution. This, combined with random mutations we can observe in some species, suggests that even without humans on Earth, there's a chance for intelligent life to develop. So, primates are now the dominant life form, or maybe the meerkats evolved into a dominant species. The climate on this Earth is also cooler than ours. That's because there are no greenhouse gases. According to NASA, the current Earth warming trend is likely the result of human activity since the 1950s. This means the increased levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere are the reason why our planet warms up. Greenhouse gases are called like this because, just like a greenhouse, they trap the heat. They let sunlight pass through the atmosphere, but the heat it brings doesn't leave our atmosphere because of them. They're a good thing because otherwise life on Earth wouldn't even be possible. But because now they're too abundant, it causes the planet to warm more than it should. Now, let's go back to our alternate Earth. In the water, the Great Barrier Reef in Australia is still fully intact. And it's still the largest coral reef system there is, as well as the biggest living organism on the planet, just like ours. This new Earth is also full of trees, and lush ones at that. Greenery everywhere. All sorts of trees exist and are home to all the different animals on the planet. And since there's no deforestation, the planet's lungs, the Amazon rainforest, is able to thrive and is looking more alive and vibrant than ever. But say, what if humans were to show up on this Earth right now? Maybe this year, or the year before? They certainly wouldn't be the dominant species immediately, and would probably struggle at the very beginning. The evolution and learning process would be a slow one until they find themselves at the top. They have to adapt to their new home. This would be like traveling to around 130,000 years ago in our reality, to a place where modern humans, or Homo sapiens, had just shown up. Humans back then weren't new. The only new thing about them was that they evolved into Homo sapiens. It wasn't like we were dropped off from a spaceship onto Earth or anything like that. But in this alternative reality, that's exactly what happened. A bunch of humans were dropped from the sky on Earth. Now, they must learn everything from the ground up. They need to figure out how to survive and thrive in their new environment. They have to hunt for their own food, and they need to take what they can from the planet, much like we did 130,000 years ago. These new humans are nomads. They can't settle in one exact place because they need to explore and understand their surroundings, just like the animals that surround them. As their groups become larger, they split into smaller ones to find new places suited to build their homes, or even a place where survival might be easier. Since it's been a while that they've arrived on this new Earth, they've done some exploring and found themselves more comfortable in their new setting. Their tools are better developed, and home-like structures, like huts, finally start appearing. 50,000 years ago, we developed our language. These humans also developed their own because they need to communicate better with each other. With language, they become more and more organized and are able to make better plans for their future. All dogs come from wolves, and there are two theories of how it might have happened that wild beasts became humans' best friends. One theory says early humans somehow ended up capturing wolf pups and kept them as pets, and over time they would gradually domesticate wolves. Another theory states that wolves actually domesticated themselves. It's called survival of the friendliest. Because both wolves and humans were hunters, wolves probably also figured out they would have benefits if they stuck around humans instead of competing directly with them. Some wolves were fearful and aggressive toward humans. Others might have been friendlier, which also likely gave them access to the hunter's food supplies. As time passes, modern human behavior starts showing up. Fixed homes begin to appear in places that benefit people, maybe next to a river or places where the soil is fertile. This way, they're also able to become farmers and develop agriculture. As they settle down, communities start arising too. Since they are very social beings, it's only natural they're drawn to one another. Soon humans are all over the planet, spread around the continents, with communities and families of their own, and don't forget the pets. The planet's landscape shifts like it did in our reality, to accommodate the needs of humans. Cultures are developed, rivalry begins, they start pushing each other to great lengths. Thousands and thousands more years go by, and this human society starts to look a lot like the one we have today. Still, things might have happened a different way. There might have already been an intelligent species they would have had to compete with, and then their progress would probably have staggered a bit. Maybe a society could emerge where different intelligent life forms would be able to peacefully coexist. When you enter a coffee shop, a meerkat might be your barista. Your landlords could be a couple of gorilla siblings. Or when you go to a barber shop, a primate that's only wearing a barber jacket would be the one to cut your hair. If not, it's likely things would end up the same as our reality. Humans would not be the most numerous species on Earth, but they would certainly still be the most impactful one.
15,000 years after the construction of the first space colony, planet Kepler 452b, 1,400 light-years from Old Earth. Hello, first-year students. We're glad to welcome you to the Intergalactic University. Endless space is now home for us humans, but thousands of years ago, we used to live on just one planet we now call Old Earth. Yes, I understand it's difficult to believe. Today, it's one huge nature reserve. Mammoths and stegosaurs walk on its surface, and pterodactyls fly in its skies. It turned out to be easier to recreate animals that roamed it millions of years ago than to understand how our ancestors lived. The Great Cataclysm made them abandon the planet in a hurry, leaving much of its legacy behind. And now, we're studying it anew. But our excavations leave more questions than answers. Skyscrapers, highways, shopping centers, coffee shops, everything is buried under sand and soil. Rust has eaten away the metal, and time turns concrete into dust. Even the Hoover Dam and the Three Gorges Dam in China have crumbled. The colossal structures turned into heaps of stones. The remaining buildings have become overgrown with plants and turned into a home for millions of living creatures. But there's good news as well. Faces carved into Mount Rushmore are still visible. The mountain is granite, and this rock is one of the hardest on Old Earth. For over 15,000 years, the faces of U.S. presidents have deteriorated by only 2 inches. The monument will stand for millions of years. And the latest expedition to the Sahara Desert managed to dig out the Great Pyramid from the sand. Now any tourist can buy a ticket and look at that wonder, which even Earthlings considered very old. Surprisingly, ruins and crumbling walls of medieval castles in Europe have survived. They're built of massive stones and without metal fittings, which expand and destroy the stone when rusting. Our ancestors left behind a huge amount of garbage. Empty bottles, plastic packaging, wrappers. All this helps scientists to recreate the consumption patterns of people of the past. Thanks to this, we know for sure that in the 2000s, almost 8 billion people ate mostly chips, chocolate bars, and pizza. And they rarely drank ordinary water. They loved coffee, though. 60% of Earthlings lived on the internet for 7 hours a day. 2 billion websites worked 24/7. At first, information was stored on hard disks, flash drives, and compact disks. But this kind of storage went obsolete after a couple of years. The cloud took their place. It was an online storage with servers connected to the global network. They recorded the entire life of Earth's civilization and were stored in data centers. In space, the Earth's internet didn't work well. Apparently, huge distances and lack of technical knowledge did their job. Imagine that a Pluto resident wants to know the difference between margarita and calzone pizzas. They click the link and wait for a couple of hours for it to open. If the dough's already in the oven, no good. Each colony organized its own internet by sending satellites to orbit their planets. It took time to connect thousands of colonies into the intergalactic web we now know as Uninet. When the cataclysm struck, people had to escape, leaving their planet to its fate. Electricity went out, no one maintained the servers and data centers, and lots of info about their civilization was lost. We've scanned miles deep into the Earth and found many interesting artifacts. Students, I invite you to look at this amazing thing. The Earthlings called it a camera. People took pictures of their food, morning runs, and new shoes on it. One thing our scientists couldn't comprehend, though, is that ancient people used to communicate with its help too. One of the main mysteries of the past are the dishes of different sizes. Archaeologists find them in almost every home. They bear these names: Buddy, Cosmo, Rex, Princess. We know these were the things from which dogs and cats ate, but we don't know why people pampered these animals so much. For example, archaeologists recently unearthed a beauty salon for poodles in San Francisco. I also love my dragon from the jungles of Gliesa 832c, but I don't perm its fur and manicure its claws. And this is my favorite artifact: a book. There's nothing more valuable in the universe. There's only one sample in my antiques collection. It's a cooking recipes anthology. I paid a fortune for it. The ruins of museums are treasures for archaeologists and all the new humanity. These buildings collapsed a long time ago and now look like ordinary hills, overgrown with trees and grass. Museums are like pearls in the ocean. They lie at the bottom and wait to be fished from their shells. And sometimes, archaeologists manage that. Books, paintings, documents, and clothes have mostly turned to dust. But we can enjoy the statues that were carved out of marble by masters of ancient Greece and Rome. On the walls of caves around the world, there are drawings of animals and handprints of the first people. They didn't know how to read, drive a car, or fly a spaceship, but their paintings have survived. It's incredible. Over thousands of years, time has eaten up huge dams, cities with skyscrapers and bridges, and the palm of an ancient human still adorns the cold and rough wall of a cave. Space archaeology is becoming more and more popular. Thousands of tons of space debris fly around old Earth. The real sensation is the discovery of the Voyager 1 probe. Earthlings sent it into space at the very beginning of their development. I see your condescending smiles. Today, such a device can be assembled by any first-year student from spare parts in their parents' garage. But, dear students, let's not laugh at our ancestors. They tried their best. Voyager isn't a simple satellite. The device can be compared to a message in a bottle thrown into the sea. And the cosmic sea is millions of times larger than the Pacific Ocean of old Earth. Engineers of the past left a time capsule with a message in the probe. It contains photographs of people and the nature of the planet, as well as scientific information about the Earth. 90 minutes of recorded music are of particular interest. This is a real gift from our ancestors to us, to the people of space. Radio signals that humankind sent into space have also survived. We've tracked them. Radio broadcasts, phone conversations, even music charts continue their journey through space. Millions of years later, they'll weaken and leave behind only an electromagnetic echo. In 2020, there were 1.4 billion cars on old Earth. Unbelievable! But they moved along asphalted roads on rubber tires, not in the air. When humans flew into space, they left their vehicles on the planet. Within just a couple hundred years, the cars went completely bust and turned into piles of metal, plastic, and rubber. One that survived for millennia was the lunar roving vehicle. There's no air, no water, and no earthquakes on the moon. Anything that comes here becomes kind of suspended in time, and that's what happened to the rover. Archaeologists have found a lot of other whole and crashed spacecraft on the moon. These devices are priceless artifacts in the Museum of Primitive Earth Technology. In the Svalbard archipelago in the Arctic Ocean, scientists have unearthed the Global Seed Vault. Earthlings built it in 2008. It became a real sensation. The huge silo contained 4.5 million samples of 500 seeds each. Billions of seeds have helped provide agriculture for the colonies. Now you can eat popcorn and hamburgers with real bread rolls thanks to those. For thousands of years, the seeds were kept without human attention. This isn't a miracle, but an accurate scientific calculation. The vault is built underground at a depth of 390 feet. There are no earthquakes or floods there, and the permafrost provided the optimum temperature for the seeds to survive. Most metals are mined from ore. These ores don't contain pure metals, but only their chemical compounds. To get pure iron, the ore must be smelted first. But there's a problem. Metals from ore oxidize on contact with water or oxygen. Simply put, they rust. This is how metal returns to its natural ore state. That's why nails, metal fences, bridges, and houses rust and collapse. But this doesn't happen with gold, silver, and platinum. Things made from these metals are eternal and will never lose their shape. Of course, if you don't start hitting the rings and pennants with a hammer. During excavations, archaeologists find thousands of jewelry items. Earthlings love to wear them on their bodies. Crowns, luxurious necklaces, wedding rings. All this jewelry is now history, kept in galactic museums.
There are entire communities of unusual tiny organisms that live in lagoons in Patagonia, and they are some of the first forms of life ever. No one had known about them until two scientists, Brian and Maria, went to explore certain areas in Patagonia. Now, Patagonia occupies nearly half of Argentina, and few people live there. Only some farmers and sheep ranchers that mostly stay near rivers and grow things such as apples, pears, and alfalfa. A long time ago, it was a wild and distant place where Indian tribes lived. But this time, we're going to follow the tracks of life forms that appeared long before humans and look closer at these interesting microorganisms Brian and Maria found. Those two had to drive for 9 hours on some rough roads to reach their destination. They stayed in a small village. Only 35 people live there. These people depend on just one spring because it almost never rains there. On the last night in the village, Brian realized that satellite images he had taken had shown a set of lagoons that were only 10 miles away. The next day, the small team jumped into a car and went up the road as far as they could until it became too difficult to drive. They continued hiking the rest of the way. It was hard because they had to carry water to deal with the intense sunlight. In some spots, they ended up sinking up to their knees in a slush made of salt. Up there were 12 lagoons with perfectly clear waters. The place itself didn't offer much except for very acidic and salty water and intense direct sunlight. But it was kind of like traveling back in time, because those conditions were like what Earth looked like many, many years ago. When Brian examined the lagoons, he was surprised to see many unusual microorganisms there. We call them stromatolites, and they're so small we can't even see them without a microscope. But they get together and form large communities. In the past, many unusual species lived this way. For example, cyanobacteria. They were important back in their time because they produced oxygen. Earth, in its initial stages, didn't have much of this gas in its atmosphere. The first stromatolites might have been formed by diverse types of bacteria that didn't necessarily produce any oxygen, but were just living their peaceful life there. They formed layers, piling on top of one another, so that at least some of them could get a bit of sunlight. They used sand and sticky liquids to stay close together. Brian was also incredibly surprised because those were the biggest living stromatolites he had ever seen. Living stromatolites usually grow to be over 3.3 feet high, but the newly found ones were 15 feet wide and a few feet tall, which is giant compared to those living in other places. And fossilized ones were even larger. A long time ago, they could grow bigger than today because there weren't many other species that could eat or harm them. Also, there are many other organisms today that can grow faster and more massive than them and take up their space. That's why stromatolites can only survive in rare places where hardly anything else can live, like in these very salty lagoons located high above sea level in Punta de Atacama. The stromatolites found there are the most famous ones because they might be some of the best examples of the earliest life on our planet. But they're not actually the first form of life on Earth. The oldest of their fossils are 3.5 billion years old, while some other evidence we have tells us that life on our planet appeared around 4.1 billion years ago. Maybe some stromatolites lived back then as well. But Earth has changed a lot since then, and the places where they might have lived haven't survived. Now, all this may not seem like a lot at first glance, because no one has found an exotic and weird beast our world has never seen. But these are notable examples of what searching for life somewhere else in the universe might look like. Scientists who are interested in studying Mars often come to this place, since it might be similar to what the red planet looked like an exceptionally long time ago. If there were fossils hidden in the ancient rocks on Mars, they might look like these stromatolites. Another faraway land has revealed some of its secrets. It's Antarctica, with an ancient lost world found under its ice. Antarctica hasn't always been this frosty, isolated land of snow and ice sheets. Once it used to be part of the Gondwana supercontinent, together with what is now South America, Africa, Australia, the Arabian Peninsula, and the Indian subcontinent. But at some point, it split off and went to build a life on its own. It formed as other landmasses started to move away, which created its coastline. But Antarctica was different in many other ways back then too. It used to be a land covered in magnificent forests and rivers full of life. Scientists use radar and satellites to explore a mysterious world hidden under the ice there. This ancient land, which is close to the Indian Ocean, is as big as the U.S. state of Maryland or Belgium. It's more than 14 million years old. Some studies say that this area formed over 34 million years ago, which was way before Antarctica got into its deep freeze. At first, temperatures there were higher, possibly like the weather in Patagonia or the cold, temperate rainforests of Tasmania, New Zealand, or maybe even more tropical than that. But as the climate became cooler, small glaciers started forming on hills close to the rivers. Valleys sunk deeper because of all that ice covering them. And then, temperatures dropped even lower, and a giant layer of ice covered the entire continent, hiding those old glaciers. Rivers shaped this lost world a long time ago, way before it ended up covered in ice that's almost 2 miles thick in some spots. Scientific studies of this area showed that those landscapes had been full of highlands and mountains. The ice that formed over Antarctica made the whole area very cold, so the landscape couldn't erode anymore. This means everything has remained basically the same and untouched under the ice for millions and millions of years. What's interesting is that we know less about this land hidden under the ice than about the surface of Mars. One way to explore it would be to drill through these ice sheets to check for samples of sediments below. They could tell us more about the ancient flora and fauna frozen underneath. It's not a new method. A similar method was used to collect 2-million-year-old samples in Greenland. Australia has a secret world too. Ancient organisms were found hidden in rocks in the northern parts of the continent that are about 1.6 billion years old. These microscopic things are part of a family called eukaryotes. The members of this family that exist today include plants, fungi, animals, and even those tiny organisms with just one cell, such as amoeba. All living things with nuclei in their cells, including us, can trace their family tree back to one of the oldest members of this family. That one is called the last eukaryotic common ancestor, and it lived more than 1.2 billion years ago. Those ancient organisms were more complex and bigger than bacteria. Maybe they were the first predators on Earth, hunting bacteria.
You're walking down the street. You see a strange-looking antique shop called Ageless Trinkets of Mr. Bright. You're curious, so you enter there. You take a look at all the weird stuff. Suddenly, an old folded parchment paper catches your attention. It's a world map, but something's off with it. Instead of showing the countries as you know them, it shows the locations of 4 mythical lost worlds and civilizations. Mr. Bright, the shop owner, comes next to you after realizing your shock. This map won't let you find these places or anything, but I can explain to you the legends behind them if you want, he says. Let me begin with Atlantis. You might know it as Aquaman's underwater kingdom, but Atlantis, the fictional island, was actually first introduced in two of Plato's works. According to him, Atlantis was a highly advanced civilization that existed about 9,000 years before his own time, and its story had been passed down by poets, authors, and others. He wrote about Atlantis and its citizens to give a moral lesson and to teach about the dangers of arrogance, as well as the eventual downfall of those who are after too much power. In his dialogues, Plato stated that Atlantis was a great and powerful empire that was respected in all parts of the world. It was founded by beings who were half deities and half human, and became a great naval power after a while. Being an island filled with gold, silver, and other precious metals certainly helped their case. But besides that, it was also known for its breathtaking architecture and state-of-the-art technology, as well as its countless rare and exotic wild animals. Atlanteans were proud of their great achievements and the perfection of their civilization, but their excessive pride was going to bring their downfall. They believed they were so superior that they could gain control over any nation. This led them to launch a series of invasions. They conquered many of the Mediterranean lands, but when it was time to enter Athens, Athenians pushed back with an extraordinary force, so the Atlanteans were finally defeated. Plato stated that deities then got angry at Atlanteans because of how wicked, greedy, and immoral they became. So they punished them by sending earthquakes, which caused Atlantis to sink beneath the sea. Although the earliest written records of Atlantis were Plato's works, some people still believed his story to be based on truth and tried to identify the island of Atlantis with actual countries. Some people suggested it may have been located in the Mediterranean Sea, near the coast of Spain or Italy. Others thought it may have been located in the Caribbean, off the coast of Central or South America, but there was no solid evidence to support any of these claims. One theory, in particular, seemed more plausible than the others, though. Located in the Aegean Sea, the island of Santorini was the home of a highly advanced Minoan society. However, due to a huge volcanic eruption, it was destroyed about 3,600 years ago, causing the Minoan civilization to suddenly disappear. These similarities between the fictional Atlanteans and the historical Minoans made Santorini a good candidate for the speculations. Yet again, there were still major flaws with it, such as how the time when Plato said Atlantis was destroyed doesn't coincide with the time of Santorini's eruption. So Atlantis still continues to be regarded as nothing more than a popular legend in the scientific world. Now, let's move toward the northeast direction on the map, Mr. Bright says. According to Celtic Breton mythology, there once was a magnificent city called Ys, also known as Caris, that towered over Douarnenez Bay in France's Brittany region. It was the most wealthy city in the entire Atlantic. It was especially famous for its beautiful gardens and buildings, and its citizens were all living comfortably and happily there. Dahut, who was King Bradlon's daughter in Breton legends and literature, had a deep love for the sea. She begged her father to build a city at the edge of the sea, and that is how the city of Ys was established. Little did she know that she would be the one responsible for the destruction of her father's beloved gift. You see, since the city was surrounded by the sea, it needed to be protected by a dike equipped with floodgates, and these gates could only be opened at low tide. And the only one who had the keys to these gates was the king himself. One day, a handsome red knight arrived at the city, but couldn't pass the gates. Dahut was so taken by him that she wanted to let him in. She knew that her father was the keeper of the only key to the city, so she sneaked into his room and stole it from him. Then she gave it to the Red Knight so that he could enter the city and they could be together. However, the Red Knight turned out to be the Prince of Darkness, and he intentionally left the gate open to the raging sea. The waves soon swallowed all of Ys. King Gradlon was able to escape on his magical horse, but Dahut couldn't. She turned into an evil mermaid who lured sailors into the sea. Today, if you go to Quimper, a city in Brittany, northwest France, you can find the statue of King Gradlon riding on his horse. Although the city of Ypres is a legend, Brittany coast locals believe that on the days when the waters are calm, you can still hear the tolls of the city bells deep under the sea, if you listen carefully. Mr. Bright then points at the Indian Ocean on the map and says, "Now, have you heard about Lemuria?" Back in the mid-1800s, a few scientists suggested that there was once a continent that existed in the Indian Ocean, somewhere close to the south of modern-day Sri Lanka. The first one to popularize this theory was the British lawyer and zoologist Philip Lutley Sclater. In his paper, The Mammals of Madagascar, he stated that he found lemur fossils in India, and not in Africa. However, this discovery was extremely shocking to him because of the fact that lemurs' original homeland, Madagascar, is much closer to Africa. He proposed that this was possible only if some larger continent connected the two once. He stated that this continent must have eventually sunk to the ocean floor. He then named it Lemuria, and hence the theory was born. People who came after Sclater took his theory a step further and thought that Lemuria was also the home of an extinct race of humans called Lemurians, who had 4 arms and enormous bodies, and were also the ancestors of modern-day humans, as well as lemurs. Of course, as new scientific discoveries were made on plate tectonics, evolution, and the study of DNA, the theories regarding the fictional continent called Lemuria were debunked. The last fictional land on the map is Agartha, Mr. Bright says. Taking its roots from Eastern mysticism, one legend says there's a kingdom called Agartha that is located deep beneath the surface of the earth. It's where all 4 corners of the world are connected by paths and tunnels. It is said that there's a secret entrance into Agartha hidden in the Gobi Desert, and it's built by Agarthans themselves using advanced technology that can't be detected by us, the surface folks. According to some beliefs, Agartha exists to counterbalance the energies of those who live above the surface. While we live in a state of rush and heightened emotions, this world beneath us is the total opposite. Some even say that those who escaped Atlantis fled here to continue their lives inside the Earth's core. And yet, others think it's actually a land that's crawling with all kinds of monsters. But there's no need to be scared, since modern science proved Earth's core is not actually hollow and is a solid hot iron ball. So you can cancel your journey plans to the center of the Earth if you've made any. Thanks, Mr. Bright.
An hour after people disappear, most urban areas will be left empty and quiet. Perhaps the sound of wind, falling leaves, or other natural sounds previously drowned out by city noise and traffic will be heard. The subways of many cities are protected from groundwater by a system of pumps. If there are no people to monitor such systems, most subways will flood within 36 hours. Due to malfunctions, sewage treatment plants will stop working, leading to pollution of rivers and lakes with wastewater. The water pipes in Detroit will become unusable, leading to the flooding of the city. Food in refrigerators will spoil. Raccoons and wolves will inhabit abandoned human homes. Major airports will be covered in rust and overgrown with ivy. Cruise ships in Alaska will sink under the weight of ice that accumulates on them. Lions from the San Diego Zoo will gradually escape, emboldened by the power outage of the electric fence around their enclosures. More and more black cats will appear on the streets of Rome and the Vatican. Rats and mice will consume all edible reserves and leave the cities. Plants will begin to grow in cracks in streets, highways, sidewalks, and buildings. More and more animals will notice the absence of people and flock to the cities. International Space Station will gradually decrease. Since no one will correct its orbit, the station will eventually fall to Earth and burn up. Along with it, digitized samples of human DNA will perish. A large part of the city's territory will be covered with a vegetation of lianas, grasses, and tree seedlings. The Red Square in Moscow will have a layer of soil and thick grasses growing, making the square completely green. Despite high levels of radiation, animal populations are increasing in abandoned areas. Plants have grown in many houses and buildings. Seawater will flood cities that were once drained by artificial drainage systems, such as London and Amsterdam. Satellites will begin to fall to Earth. Since no one maintained their speed of movement, they slowly approached Earth and eventually fell to the planet's surface. Wolves now roam freely around the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, and wild boars will be seen in Paris. Human speech will be preserved in rare words that parrots have memorized during their years of living with humans. Snakes will not only reproduce at incredible rates, but also grow much larger in size. Their main prey will be rodents that have multiplied in the first years after humans disappeared. Many human-made structures will collapse within 100 years, primarily those with a large number of steel elements. Fruit Christmas cakes, thanks to their alcohol coating, will not only retain their appearance but also freshness. Most buildings will be overtaken by plants and animals, and the city will resemble more of a wild nature landscape. The period of nuclear fuel decay will come to an end, and as a result, dead zones around the ruins of nuclear power plants will once again become habitable. The last parrots that spoke human language may go extinct since they memorized human speech, but it is simply not necessary for their survival in the wild. All modern carriers of information that preserve human culture, laser discs, photographic film, paper, and the like, will turn to dust. Rebar inside concrete buildings, which are more durable than steel ones, will expand 3 times due to rust, causing the destruction of concrete structures. Most modern cities will be covered by a green blanket, and collapsed skyscrapers and buildings will become new hills. Manhattan will return to its former state before human settlement, with numerous streams and lakes. There will be almost no evidence of the existence of human civilization. Only powerful stone buildings that rely solely on the force of gravity will survive, such as Notre Dame de Paris. Of the products that existed during human civilization, only honey, especially in clay pots, and oil in wooden barrels, will be well preserved. Only a few stone structures will survive, including the pyramids in Giza and the Sphinx, almost entirely buried in the sands of the desert, and fragments of the Great Wall of China. By this time, a new ice age will begin on Earth. It is expected that the KEO satellite will enter the atmosphere by this time. Various pieces of space debris will collide with it during its descent, but this will not destroy the satellite. Eventually, it will fall into the waters of the world ocean. Remnants of spacecraft and satellite debris will float through space as the only reminder of human civilization.
We're far from that, but it's still nice to imagine. At the moment, our civilization is in the stage scientists named an immature technosphere. That means we're still too focused on using technology that doesn't always do good for our planet. We don't have a planetary intelligence or a collective understanding of what needs to be done to do better for our planet. Instead, we're all just doing our own thing. I mean, we're not at the worst stage. Researchers have come up with 4 stages of Earth's past and future to explain how planetary intelligence could impact the long-term future of humanity. The first stage is what we call the immature biosphere. It's when life first started on Earth, billions of years ago. Only microbes were there on the bare land without any vegetation. There wasn't any global feedback, which means these microbes couldn't yet affect Earth, its atmosphere, or other systems in any way. The second stage is the mature biosphere, which was 2.5 billion to 540 million years ago, when stable continents formed and the biosphere started to have a strong influence on the Earth. The third stage, known as immature technosphere, is where we are now, with interlinked systems of communication, technology, transportation, electricity, and computers that draw resources from Earth's systems and affect the biosphere. The fourth stage, also known as the mature technosphere, is where Earth should aim to be in the future. It means technology will benefit the entire planet. We'll use sustainable forms of energy, like solar power. Planetary intelligence is the sign of a mature planet, and researchers are trying to figure out how we can move towards it. So, things we do on an individual level do matter. The collective activity of life, like microbes or plants, can change a planet and make it more than just a lifeless rock floating in space. Through the biosphere, our home planet kind of figured out how to host life by itself billions of years ago, and it's still going. Now we need to figure out how to have a similar kind of self-maintaining system, but this time with the technosphere. It's hard to imagine planets could generally become sentient, like Pandora, or some other imaginary conscious world out there. There are a few reasons for that. First, planets form based on how different materials, like rocks, gases, and liquids, gather around a new star. It's like you have a big family gathering, where everyone brings different ingredients to make a delicious dish. And just like how these ingredients won't suddenly turn into a living being, the materials that make up a planet won't just turn into self-aware creatures. On Earth, after billions of years of complex chemical reactions, some molecules started to replicate themselves and carry information. That's how life on our planet began. And Earth is the only such example we have. Here's the second reason. Imagine you have a big garden where you plant a lot of mushrooms or bacteria, hoping they'll become really smart and help you take care of the garden. But mushrooms and bacteria don't have brains like we do. It's not like they need it anyway. Having a big brain is really expensive for animals too. It takes a lot of energy to keep it running. So, animals only become as smart as they need to be to survive and thrive in their environment. Dogs and cats are pretty smart because they need to be able to avoid danger and find food. They don't need human kind of intelligence for things like building houses, creating art, or inventing new technologies. So, it would be hard to bring all living beings and plants to the same level of intelligence. The third reason why it would be difficult for a planet to become sentient is the main rule of the animal kingdom. Life is all about survival of the fittest. Every creature is competing for resources like water, food, and space. But not only do different species compete against each other, but individuals within the same species also fight. Just think of how fiddler crabs fight for territory on the beach, or how wolf packs fight over prey. Or me, when I see an empty spot on a crowded beach. This kind of competition is not a good base for global cooperation. There are a couple of exceptions to this rule. For example, ants. They may not be the brightest creatures on the planet, but when they come together in colonies, they can achieve amazing things, like gathering food that's way bigger than them, building nests, raising young, and even farming. In fact, they act like a superorganism called a hive mind, where every ant works together towards a common goal. Insects like bees and ants are very altruistic and work together to ensure their queen reproduces. If one large ant colony took over our whole planet, it could act as a single mind and work towards the colony's and planet's interests until they run out of resources. But in reality, it's hard to imagine any organism, even a superorganism, could reach such a level of self-awareness and consciousness. Number 5. How could we keep in contact? When it comes to communication, ants use pheromones and humans use nerves. Both of these methods work well for small organisms, but when it comes to a giant planet-sized entity, it would be hard to make such communication fast and efficient. So, communication within a planet-sized entity would be much slower than what we have in our homes, like our computers or smartphones. Oh well, we'll just continue dreaming about Pandora.
Imagine a planet where every breath you take electrifies your body like a shot of espresso. The sky above you is an intense shade of blue, while colossal trees stretch towards the heavens, their vibrant green leaves growing at an astonishing rate. Daily exercise becomes a thrill like no other. With the abundance of oxygen, you become a supercharged version of yourself. Running feels effortless as you dart across the landscape, lifting weights that would normally seem impossible. It's as if the world itself is infused with a surge of energy. Everything is moving faster. The wildlife surrounding you is equally affected by this oxygen overload. Animals roam the land in majestic proportions. Their massive frames are propelled by speed and agility. Picture yourself in a pulse-pounding chase with an oxygen-charged cheetah, racing against a predator that could put a Ferrari to shame. Now you may wonder how such a wild scenario could ever be possible. Well, let's see. Oxygen is the powerful fuel that keeps life going. It makes up about 21% of the air we breathe, and every breath we take delivers these tiny molecules to our cells, giving them the energy they need to thrive. Without oxygen, our cells would struggle, and our bodies would fall apart. But that's not all. Oxygen is a superstar that works for all kinds of living things, from tiny bacteria to giant elephants. It's even important underwater, where it enriches the oceans. Amazing creatures like plankton and algae produce lots of oxygen, creating a thriving underwater world. But to fully understand the impact of high oxygen levels on the planet, prepare for a journey back in time. Recently, scientists have made an astonishing discovery. They tested rocks from 2 different places that were really far apart. And can you believe it? These rocks held tiny pockets of gas that showed how oxygen levels shot up by almost 1/3 in a very short time. It was like a breath of fresh air. So they studied these rocks and found that oxygen levels back then were much higher. Imagine lush landscapes, towering forests, and gigantic swamps that stretched as far as you could see. During the Carboniferous period, oxygen ruled the atmosphere at an impressive 20%, just like today. But over the next 50 million years, its levels shot up to a crazy 35%. Can you imagine what that did? As oxygen surged, something incredible happened. Huge forests grew all over the land, creating a breathtaking green world. And massive swamps took over low-lying areas, making the landscape look surreal and otherworldly. At the same time, carbon dioxide levels dropped. Normally, when things break down, microbes release carbon dioxide into the air. This gas acts like a warm blanket, trapping the sun's heat and raising temperatures. But in the mysterious swamps where these giant plants were buried, the microbes couldn't do their job. The result? The planet got really cold. Who would have thought that a breath of fresh air could have such power? The scientists are still trying to figure out why this happened. But one thing is certain, it wasn't just happening in one place. It was a worldwide phenomenon. It was like the planet was playing a funny game with the climate. But let's go even earlier. We see the first North American dinosaurs making their grand entrance. High oxygen levels are what gave a big boost to the rise of mighty dinosaurs in North America and beyond. Picture tropics filled with the magnificent giant creatures. Obviously, dinosaurs didn't just appear out of nowhere. They took advantage of a changing environment that was perfect for their evolution. Oxygen levels played a huge part in this dinosaur party. As oxygen levels rose, so did the size of these incredible creatures. They started small with predators like Chindosaurus, and soon after, huge dinosaurs like sauropods took over the land. Then, 65 million years ago, dinosaurs disappeared and mammals took over. And here's the interesting part. Mammals never grew as big as dinosaurs. So what's the explanation for this? Mammals, and humans are mammals too, by the way, are special because we can regulate our body temperature. But that comes at a cost. We need a lot of energy to stay warm compared to reptiles and dinosaurs. Dinosaurs didn't bother with temperature control, so they could focus on growing big. The biggest dinosaurs were 10 times larger than the largest mammals. It's like a game of anything you can do, I can do 10 times bigger. Dinosaurs might have had similar limitations with their sizes, but those were much less strict. Before the dinosaurs' extinction, mammals were very small. Many mammal species disappeared along with the dinosaurs. But survivors took advantage of the open ecosystem and rapidly diversified into various body sizes. However, after 42 million years of growth, mammals reached a size plateau. This happened on all continents, most likely because of the temperature and land area. Colder environments allowed mammals to grow larger. Balancing body size and heat became challenging. Land area also played a role in sustaining big populations. But making animals bigger isn't the only thing high oxygen can do. This humble gas is a true jack of all trades. It also acts as our loyal bodyguard, protecting us from harmful UV rays and other dangers from space. Without oxygen, we would be defenseless against space threats. Oxygen also has a fascinating role in shaping the weather. It teams up with its other atmospheric buddies to make the sky go wild with tornadoes, hurricanes, and thunderstorms. They mix and mingle in the air, creating just the right conditions for these exciting weather adventures to happen. And these adventures can be dangerous, but they serve an important purpose. They help distribute nutrients and organic matter, carrying soil, leaves, and debris to new places. So what if we decided to mess with nature and crank up the oxygen levels to crazy heights, 30%, 40%, or even 50%? Well, too much of a good thing can become dangerous. Oxygen toxicity is when too much of this gas causes big problems. It's like eating loads of candy. It's fun at first, but soon enough you'll regret it. Surprisingly, an overdose of oxygen can leave you struggling for breath, like a tired dancer in desperate need of a break. At first you might feel a burst of energy, but it doesn't last. Dizziness sets in, as if you've been spinning on the dance floor for hours without stopping. In extreme cases, too much oxygen can even harm your body, making you feel like you've crashed into a huge truck. So while oxygen is always with us, giving us life, it's important to appreciate its delicate balance. Don't put on your special breathing gear. Also, we wouldn't be the only creatures to suffer from this oxygen extravaganza. Mammals, for example, will struggle to adapt to these extreme levels. The balance of power among species will change drastically, and winners and losers will fight for survival in a world that's spinning out of control. And we'll need stronger shelters to deal with these gigantic animals. We'll have to stay nimble and avoid danger. Amidst all the chaos, there will be astonishing adaptations. Birds will fly higher than ever before, reaching heights that would amaze even the clouds. Also, get ready for more natural disasters and delicate ecosystems hanging in the balance. Fires will start quickly and rage fiercely, making wildfires a constant threat. Even a small spark from a campfire could cause disaster. We'll need to rethink our cooking and heating methods to stay safe in this oxygen-filled world. But let's not forget the other side of the oxygen story. If we had a planet with low oxygen, only around 15%, we would face a completely different struggle. Every breath would be difficult, leaving us tired and struggling for air. Physical activity would become extremely hard, and our memory and focus would suffer. So let's be grateful for the oxygen levels we have now. They're the perfect balance for us to thrive. In this exhilarating journey through an oxygen-rich world, we've experienced breathtaking wonders and discovered the delicate balance of our planet. Let's cherish the magic in every breath, respect the interplay of oxygen and life, and embrace the thrill of this remarkable ride called life.
You know how it all started 13.8 billion years ago with the Big Bang. Bam! No, wait, I can do better. No, never mind. And the universe has been expanding ever since. At its young age, it was all made of gas, mostly helium and hydrogen. For billions of years, the gas has expanded and cooled down. Meanwhile, galaxies, stars, and other mysterious things in space we try to explore today formed because of gravitational forces. And in that chaos, just like in middle school, about 4.6 billion years ago, our magnificent planet was born too. It all started as a disk of gas and dust that orbited the young sun, just the same way it was with the rest of the planets in our solar system. This disk consisted of dust particles of different sizes and gas. They were circling the sun at different speeds and in orbits that weren't stable and predictable. They were bumping into each other all the time. These particles grew from very small grains of dust into boulders, then later into bigger objects called planetesimals that had a range from miles to hundreds of miles in diameter. And these planetesimals that were orbiting the sun within the disk had gravitational force strong enough to pull other objects from the neighborhood out of their orbits and collide with them. As they were constantly hitting each other, they got bigger and bigger until some got to the size of thousands of miles in diameter. That's nearly the size of Mars and the Moon. We know these things because of meteorites. They come from different places all over our solar system and bring all kinds of materials to our planet, giving us something cool to study and learn about our solar system and how it formed. These materials include very small pieces of dust and rock that have gone through the chaos and survived those rough times even before the planets were created. Meteorites also brought pieces of asteroids and planetesimals left behind after the planet-forming process ended. As these objects were forming, some radioactive elements were left trapped inside the minerals that, again, were part of them. That's how scientists could tell how old they were. But the final stage of Earth's formation, and generally this whole chaos that was happening in our solar system, may have taken a little bit longer, possibly even up to 100 million years more. That's when the last enormous impact was, and the Earth finally reached its full size. What actually happened is that it hit another object which was nearly as large as Mars. This collision was so strong that the impact produced enough energy to vaporize some of the metal and rock, both from the Earth and the Mars-sized object. And this vapor created a disk that was surrounding our planet. That disk cooled and clumped together at some point, which is when we got our moon. Our moon was the result of impact debris, which was a combination of hot gas and molten rock. There are some theories of how the moon formed, though. One claims it broke off from the Earth. Another one says the moon formed somewhere else in our solar system, and at some point, as it was wandering around, it got so close to Earth that it ended up captured by its gravity. And fans of the third theory believe the moon and the Earth formed at the same time, from the same protoplanetary disk. Before the moon formed, the Earth was a much different place. If you could have just one day on Earth without the moon, you'd be first surprised by the days and nights. They wouldn't be as stable as they are today because the moon helps to keep the Earth's axis stable. Days were shorter back then. The Earth had been rotating much faster before the moon formed. Its gravitational pull slowed the rotation of our planet, which means days got longer. The Earth's rotation is getting slower through time, but at a really small rate. Some predictions say that in 1 billion years, a typical day will be between 25.5 and 31.7 hours long. If 24 hours is not enough time for you, just wait 1 billion years. But yeah, if you're the type of person that likes to take things slowly, you definitely have to hurry back then. Although there weren't many things you could do back then than to fill your time besides, sailing across the hot lava, collecting rocks, or hoping not to get hit in the head by some fierce meteorite falling onto our planet. Ow! But if you were patient enough, maybe you'd see something really cool – water coming onto our planet for the first time. There was a rain of fiery meteors coming from the sky, and they kept slamming into our young Earth. It looked devastating at first, but some of this falling debris probably held water. Many believe the asteroids and comets that bumped into our home planet carried tiny amounts of water. But considering this meteorite shower lasted more than 20 million years, maybe even up to 200 million years, it's not that unusual that after a while, puddles of water started to collect across the surface. And as the water evaporated within the atmosphere, it would fall back down, forming lakes, rivers, seas, and eventually oceans. Only at that point, there was a chance for some primitive life to evolve sometime in the future. Earth started its transition from a hot ball of magma to the world we know today. Before that, it would be too hard for life to exist there. Even if it had happened somehow, all those meteor and asteroid collisions would have probably destroyed it. Also, you wouldn't be able to survive without an oxygen tank. The Earth did have an atmosphere, but it wasn't like the one we have today. Scientists believe it was composed of water vapor, methane, ammonia, and some other gases released from volcanic activity. Basically, it was too toxic, since there were volcanic eruptions all the time. And the temperatures were way higher, so just standing at these early stages of Earth wouldn't be such a pleasant experience. Also, there could even be some form of life at that time. In its early stages, when everything was so chaotic, it wasn't covered in oceans, trees, or stunning landscapes like today, but in molten magma. I mean, the earliest form of life we know about are fossils of microorganisms found in hydrothermal vents, and they're thought to be 1.4 billion years old. And scientists assume the earliest time for life to show on Earth could be 4.2 billion years ago, give or take. So, with the right equipment, you could even see some single-celled organisms like bacteria somewhere across our chaotic planet, even before the moon was there. The moon's gravitational pull on the Earth creates tides in the ocean, which means it probably helped mix and circulate ocean water, maybe even shape them. The tides without the moon would be much smaller, because the gravitational pull is what causes the tides to rise and fall. The moon also affects life in the ocean. Over time, animals in the ocean have changed and adapted to the changing water levels caused by the moon's gravity. Even just the moonlight has a big effect on sea creatures. For example, corals use the moon's cycle to release their eggs at the same time and with stronger tides to help carry the eggs. Baby sea turtles use the moon's light shining on the water to guide them from their nests to the ocean. Who knows which directions life on the Earth would have taken if, at some point, billions of years ago, we didn't get our lunar buddy to follow us along the way. Now, our planet has gone through 5 mass extinctions. One of them was so bad, it wiped out over 95% of life forms on our planet. Scientists think they might have found the culprit – volcanoes. Scientists took some ancient rocks from a dozen global locations and found elevated levels of mercury, which was released by volcanoes millions of years ago. This points to volcanic eruptions as the probable cause of the Permian-Triassic extinction event. The mercury didn't just come from rocks, it was from the atmosphere. This means that when the volcanoes erupted, they released this poisonous gas into the air. They produced about 720,000 cubic miles of ash, vastly more than the infamous eruption of Mount St. Helens. The gas left a trace that marks one of history's most significant catastrophes, setting the stage for the age of dinosaurs. These eruptions most likely released mercury by igniting large coal deposits. Shallower waters showed mercury spikes right at the extinction's main horizon, while deeper sections recorded spikes tens of thousands of years earlier. This could mean that the effects of the volcanic activity and the extinction it triggered varied across different ocean depths. That means that the extinction was prolonged and complex. It not only caused significant climate warming at the time, but also led to some other toxic events like acid rain, which made the situation even worse for plants and animals. Although few things have made it from the Permian period to the present day, we can get an idea of what the world was like back then from the fossils found in eastern Kansas. Now, 252 million years ago, the Earth was thriving. The Earth's continents were coming together to form the supercontinent Pangaea. The land was mostly dry, and the Earth looked like a harsh, arid desert, vast stretches of land with minimal water sources. The climate varied from scorching summers to frigid winters. There were some plants here and there, mostly conifers, large ferns, and primitive mosses in places with more water. The Earth was dominated by dinosaur-like creatures like paleosaurs or therapsids, often called mammal-like reptiles. There was also the fierce Dimetrodon with its awesome snail-like spine. These three were the top predators of their time. Smaller reptiles and amphibians also populated the landscape, alongside burgeoning insects like beetles and dragonflies, which thrived during that dry time. But all the interesting stuff mostly happened in shallow tropical seas. Marine environments were bustling with life: rich coral reefs, shellfish called brachiopods, animals known as bryozoans, and large single-cell fusilinids, which kind of look like they're covered in moss. Small funny ammonoids were quite popular as well, often hanging out in the oceans alongside brachiopods, bony fish, and sharks. Creepy trilobites, ancient marine creatures that first appeared 500 million years ago in the Cambrian period, but then persisted up to the Permian period. Trilobites were very diverse, active predators to scavengers or plankton eaters. However, almost all these beautiful creatures were about to disappear during the Permian-Triassic extinction. Now, this extinction was truly ruthless. More than two-thirds of amphibian and reptile species disappeared, and nearly one-third of all insect species were wiped out. Usually, the insects are resilient survivors, which shows how catastrophic this event was. Among these extinct animals was the terrifying Meganeuropsis, a giant dragonfly with a wingspan of nearly 2.5 feet, once found in central Kansas near Elmo. This place is famous for its rich collection of Permian insect fossils, including ancient crickets and cockroaches. For a while, it was a mystery what exactly happened. Theories range from a massive asteroid strike and natural pollutants choking the oceans of oxygen, to dust clouds, to cosmic volcanic eruptions blocking the sun and cooling the planet. There was evidence for each of these scenarios, but the recent discovery points to the volcanoes theory after all. There's also a possibility that the reason wasn't just the volcanoes. NASA-funded researchers have recently uncovered what might be the fingerprints of this ancient perpetrator, or at least one of its accomplices. By investigating rocks around the globe, they've found evidence pointing to a massive asteroid strike as a possible culprit. They found unusual molecules shaped like soccer balls, known as fullerenes. These molecules contain rare gases that usually come from space. This suggests that an enormous space rock, perhaps as large as Mount Everest, crashed into the Earth, contributing to extinction. There seems like there might have been a series of catastrophic events. The volcanoes were spewing vast quantities of lava and gas that altered the climate, Pangaea was forming and disrupting weather and ocean patterns, and an asteroid decided to join in as the cherry on top. Lucky for us, nature is super persistent and always finds its way to be reborn. This just proves how resilient the Earth is. Now, what's interesting is this wasn't the only time that happened. The late Devonian extinction, which happened around 360 million years ago, is also tied to volcanic activity. Volcanic eruptions and the proliferation of land plants could have altered the nutrients flowing into the oceans. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction, which happened around 200 million years ago, a bit before the dinosaurs, might have also been a result of a volcanoes plus asteroid impact combo. And finally, about 66 million years ago, the last dramatic shift happened on Earth. Our planet went from the age of dinosaurs to the age of mammals. This momentous change is known as the KPG extinction. Just like the Permian extinction, it was a sudden event that ushered in new forms of life. And, once again, there are two major theories about what happened. The most popular theory tells us that the dinosaurs disappeared because of a massive asteroid. The Chicxulub meteorite smashed into present-day southern Mexico, creating the Chicxulub crater. The meteor was about 6 miles wide, and hurtling towards Earth at incredible speeds. The impact was so powerful that it vaporized everything nearby instantly and released more energy than any other event in a billion years. The aftermath was catastrophic. Earthquakes shook the continents, and the ground itself heaved like a stormy sea. As the dust thrown up by the asteroid settled, it fell back to Earth like rain, heating up the atmosphere so much that forests worldwide burst into flames. Not far behind was a gigantic tsunami, stirred up by the ocean floor's upheaval, which swamped coastlines near the Gulf of Mexico. Not all dinosaurs perished immediately. In places like New Zealand, some dinosaur populations survived initially. However, a dark, ash-filled sky eventually covered the globe, blocking out the sun and plunging the world into cold and darkness. The long-term effect of the asteroid is what really sealed the fate for dinosaurs. Without sunlight, the food chain collapsed rapidly. Herbivores slowly disappeared, followed by the carnivores that depended on them, and the ash settling back to the Earth exacerbated the environmental upheaval, with fluctuating temperatures making survival tough. But there's another theory that says that, like with the Permian extinction, the asteroid was just the cherry on top. The dinosaur extinction was inevitable because of the volcanoes. Around 1 million years before the dinosaurs' demise, massive volcanic activity began under where India is today. This event created the Deccan Traps, a vast plateau formed from layers of lava that covered an area as large as France. For hundreds of thousands of years, these volcanoes spewed sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This turned the skies dark and the rain acidic, poisoning food sources and turning oceans into toxic baths. These changes were gradual but relentless, stressing ecosystems, breaking food chains, and leading to a slow but steady decline in many species, including the dinosaurs. Although it's not certain which theory is true, scientists now think that both were equally to blame. Maybe one day we'll have a clear picture of how the reign of the dinosaurs came to such an abrupt end.
Picture this. It's a lovely Sunday morning, and you rise from your bed, do some stretching, and open your window to a gorgeous day with clear skies. But hold up, something's odd here. The usually jam-packed street is completely deserted. Where did everyone go? You take a closer look, and to your surprise, you realize that you're the only soul on this planet. What's your next move? Let's get real here. The answer to that question is simple. You can do anything and everything that your heart desires. The world is your playground, and you can create your own adventure. Want to drive a sports car at lightning speed on the freeway? Go ahead, because there's no traffic to hold you back. Feel like playing a round of golf from the top of a skyscraper? Why not? Who cares if you end up breaking a window or two with your golf ball? Have you always dreamed of living in a massive mansion? Guess what? Now you can. You have a world of possibilities in front of you, and nothing can stop you from experiencing them all. Okay, so you've had your fill of all the excitement and thrill, and you're now starting to ponder on the question of what's next. Maybe it's time to get down to business and figure out the reason behind the world's sudden emptiness. Could there be anyone else out there? What if you're not the only one left? You might start searching the city, and even venture beyond its limits. But the world is a big place, and you might not come across another living soul. That thought alone can be a bit terrifying, right? So let's move on to more important matters, such as how you're going to survive in this desolate wasteland that's now your kingdom. It's time to face reality and plan out your next steps to ensure that you can make it through this situation, no matter what. The first thing on your to-do list is finding food and clean water. Of course, you'll have a good supply of both for some time, but perishable items such as fruits and vegetables won't last forever, so it's best to consume them first before they go bad. After all, there's nobody operating the power stations that power the refrigeration units in grocery stores, so they will inevitably shut down. Speaking of which, you also need to consider your water source. In the initial stages, try to scavenge every single bottle of water you can find from the nearby stores and bring them back to your sanctuary. But, unfortunately, you'll eventually run out of bottled water, and you'll have to come up with a way to filter your water supply. This will be a vital task to ensure your survival in the long run. Think of laying your hands on a portable water filter like this one. With that, you will be able to take water from any source, be it a river or even a hole you dug up yourself, and drink it in no time after it's been cleansed in this bottle. So you've indulged in all the perishable food items you had stocked up on for days, weeks, or maybe even months. Now it's time to start thinking about the future and your long-term food supplies. Since there's no electricity to keep your fridge and freezer running, you're going to have to rely on non-perishable food items such as rice, beans, and canned goods. These will be your trusty companions in your quest for survival. However, as time passes, you'll need to think about sustainable food sources, and that's where farming skills come into play. You should start learning how to grow your own food before your stocks run out completely. Let's talk about medical supplies. They're a crucial aspect of surviving in a world where there's no one to turn to for medical assistance. Your best bet is to raid as many pharmacies as you can find and stock up on future supplies to prepare for any potential emergencies. It's essential to be extra careful too, since there won't be any doctors around to help you out if you sustain serious injuries. When you're the last human on Earth, you're going to need to learn a whole bunch of survival skills if you want to keep on keeping on. I'm talking hunting, first aid, cooking, and plenty more. It's not just about farming and filtering water, although those are important too. Right now you're probably relying on a bunch of other people, without even realizing it. But in this new world, you're gonna have to fend for yourself. The good news is that you've got all the time in the world to learn new things and expand your knowledge. Remember those libraries and bookstores you used to walk past without a second glance? Now they're your ticket to becoming the ultimate survival expert. And yeah, you won't have the internet to help you out, but you'll learn to do things the old-fashioned way. You might also want to have some survival gear with you at all times. You may get in all sorts of trouble with nobody to help you but yourself. So having a hiking toolbox like this one could be a lifesaver. It has everything you need to find your way and stay warm and safe even in the wild, not to mention the city. As much as you may enjoy the solitude, you're gonna need some sort of companionship eventually. Sure, you could get yourself a pet or two, or even build your own personal zoo if you're feeling ambitious. But be careful. You don't want to get eaten by a pack of wolves or lions, do you? Maybe just stick with a dog or a cat, or perhaps a bird that can mimic your voice so you can pretend you're having a conversation. Either way, you're gonna need some sort of connection with another living being, so start thinking about your options. So, you've got this whole world to yourself, right? And you can live in any mansion, palace, or hotel you want. Sounds great, doesn't it? But let's be real here. Living in luxury all the time can get old fast. Plus, these buildings will start to crumble and fall apart if there's nobody to take care of them. Maybe run away from the city altogether then. You can go anywhere. The world is your oyster. But before you start packing your bags, remember that you need to find a way to get there. The problem is that all the cars and trucks will be useless because their fuel will go bad after a few years. So, you might want to choose a place to settle down for good. And in my opinion, it's probably a good idea to avoid places with extreme weather conditions. I mean, dealing with a hurricane, blizzard, or tornado all by yourself doesn't sound like a walk in the park. Don't forget about the clothes. Yeah, I know, you can totally raid all the stores and try on all the funky outfits or dress like a celebrity for a while. But let's get real. You're gonna need clothes that will actually help you survive. So make sure you have something for every season, and keep plenty of warm clothes and blankets around. An emergency blanket may come in handy as well. Stock up on these just in case. It doesn't take much space and can save your life. Even if you move to a place where it's hot all the time, it can still get chilly at night, so you gotta be prepared. Hey, I know talking about being the only human left on Earth can be a total bummer. So let's switch to the brighter side of things. With nobody around, you can find all kinds of ways to entertain yourself. Sure, survival skills are important, but you can also learn new hobbies and get creative. Imagine learning to draw, make sculptures, or write your own book. You could be the next Stephen King, except without any competition. What would you call your masterpiece? The Lone Survivor? The Ultimate Survival Guide? The possibilities are endless. Just don't forget to keep talking to yourself or your pet parrot so you don't forget how to use your own voice.